Hello and welcome to Social Church. The clip that you're about to hear was taken from a recent interview that I done with Paul Shirley as we discussed his new book that's coming out at the end of the summer in 2019, Expository Sanctification. I asked Paul how important it is to be under a biblical expository preaching pastor and when is the right time to leave a church. This is a fascinating clip and I hope it's useful for you. Paul, if someone's listening to this interview and they just don't recognise the type of preaching that you're talking about and they're feeling convicted right now that maybe the church that they're going to isn't a biblical church, and what practical advice do you give somebody in that situation? Do they continue to go to that church? Is it something that they should feel challenged to go to another church? What advice would you give to someone?
That's a great question that I get asked almost on a weekly basis with people who are contacting our church or visiting our church. And the place that I always start is the gospel being preached to the church? So sometimes you can have a church where the preaching is weak, but it still has the gospel, which means somebody could be saved by hearing the truth proclaimed. So I would say in a church where the gospel is still being preached, you want to be patient and prayerful before you leave. You want to pray your way through it. You want to take the time to graciously and humbly meet with the leaders, ask them, what's your philosophy on preaching? How do you think through that? Don't come in to try to change things. Come in to try to learn what the perspective of the pastor is on these things. And that's in a gospel preaching church. On the other hand, I would say if the gospel is not being faithfully proclaimed, so you're in a prosperity gospel kind of church where all that's being preached is that you can be, healthy and wealthy if you just follow Jesus the right way, or if it's some kind of other church that's not proclaiming the gospel, like the Catholic Church. My counsel to people who are in churches like that is life is too short to go to a bad church. You need the gospel, you need the truth, and if your church is not proclaiming the gospel, then you need to get out of there as quick as you can and find a place where the gospel is proclaimed and where the truth is being heralded so that your soul can be fed. I think a large portion, I mentioned in the beginning that our church started as a church plant, and really we have the majority of our people have come to our church either through conversion, they've been saved and they've joined our church, or they've come and they're in a state of what I would call a malnourished sheep. They've gone so long without being fed the truth that they're coming to our church and they need to be fed immediately. So that's kind of the counsel I would give. Be careful if it's a gospel preaching church. You want to be humble. You want to be careful. You want to support the pastor as much as you can. You want to learn from him as much as you can before you make the decision to move. But if you're in a place where the word is not proclaimed at all and the gospel is not represented, then you are in a house on fire. And Jude says someone needs to rip you out of that house on fire so that you can be saved out of that.
Thank you so much, Paul. That's really helpful. If you would like to have your question answered on a later episode of Social Church, then please do get in touch. All you need to do is contact us via our website, www.wearesocialchurch.com, or you can reach out to us on any of our social media channels. Thanks a lot for listening. Bye for now.